All right, so let's go ahead and jump into building a dashboard from the ground up. So with that, we're looking at a pre-built dashboard, right? So this is the infrastructure analysis dashboard we've had released for a bit. So this is what the end combined result we want to get to, right? So we have our filters on the left side to apply and change all of the data set, but this whole page is just one data set. So if we start from the fundamentals here, we're going to go to the Insights Plus homepage and we're going to create our data set. That's going to bring me into SQL Lab. So now what I can do is start to specify the type of SQL I want, right? So I could do something simple. If I'm just going to use like an asset management use case and I want to know all of our compute systems, I could just use the compute DBB. And what's really nice, of course, with SQL Lab, notice it started to finish that view name, allowed me to auto-complete that, and then it showed me a preview of that specific table, in this case the DBB, with all of the columns available, and I can see the schema of it and the different data types for those columns as well. And as I run this, I can see the specific result set. So maybe instead of all of that data, or I wanted to go to the device view, I can start to take what I need, right? So maybe I want to do the view device v2, enter that. As you enter those tables, if you're already not viewing the schema, it's going to show that schema as you enter it and the results so you can see what type of data to expect. So I know name for my system. And not to spend too much time on here, we're going to make a pretty simple one. But I want also type for our system type, OS name, and let's grab also serial number. And I would also want to know the building and customer that they're in. So let's go ahead. We'll do a join here. View customer V1. See, I got the name of the customer. And we'll do on. So as I look at this, right, I can see what keys. So our customer PK, that's going to be our ID value. And what's useful to look for here, so in view device v2 customer FK, that's our foreign key. So that indicates to me how I need to join those tables. And then let me just alias this here at the top and customer FK, right? So now I can include the customer. I'll add the alias to my columns again. Name. Now, since device name and customer name share that column name, I'm just going to use quotes to set that column. I'm going to do the same for the device. Run that. Make sure I'm happy with it. There's no errors. Pretty simple one. Now that I have that, I can go ahead and create a chart from that. It's going to ask me to save as a new or overwrite an existing. So if I wanted to modify or replace a data set, again, remember that if I do that, it will replace and affect all the charts related to that data set. Since this is entirely new, just say this is devices here, and we'll save and explore. Now let's head to create a chart. So as I do create chart, this is going to bring you to the list of data sets. Now, right now, I don't have any data sets under my owner, so I'm going to flip and remove that and go to the system defined. So we can go ahead and pick out some of the other data sets. So let's look for inventory. So I have here discovery summary, virtual inventory, disk inventory, physical inventory. And I can pick from those. Maybe I want to look for actual compute here. And compute location, let's go ahead and build from that. What I would recommend is look at the system defined dashboards. Those would help give you an idea of what type of data you can expect from those data sets. Additionally, what you can do as you click on the data set and it brings you to the chart and explore page. And then you click on edit data set. And this would allow you to view in SQL Lab, bring me to SQL Lab, and I can run and see that result set with that. So I'm already a bit familiar with this data set. We can go ahead and now and manipulate our chart. First thing that's going to happen with every chart is it's going to look for a time column. Every chart has a time value and a time grain value. So we can select from different values. So if I wanted my chart to be in this perspective of the last time something changed, I could do that. Maybe instead I want to look at when systems were first added. This is going to be more important when you're considering time series data or if you're filtering by a certain value. So if I only want to include anything from the last year or so, you can manipulate the time range to do so. Since there's no filter, this is going to include everything regardless of the time values. Now, by default, it goes to a table, but let's go ahead. We can click on a few of these values to do a time chart or a line chart. So we'll just go do a pie chart here. And my dimensions, and I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint for a moment, right? So this is where time column dimensions are metric. These are components of charts to just be familiar with. So just to briefly give an intro to some of these, if you haven't used a business intelligence tool in the past, the time controls are going to allow you to use available timestamps or date columns in your data set to dictate that period of time and window of your data. And as mentioned, that is required for time series visualizations. Dimensions are going to be really what type of category of data do you want to view in that chart? So if I want to look at the count of systems by location, by customer, by operating system, those are dimensions. And then finally, metrics, and that's going to be my aggregator calculation of how that chart is displayed. So if I wanted to know all of the systems, all of the devices by location, that's going to be a count. If I wanted to know all of the CPUs or cores for a location, I can then sum that, and that would calculate the sum across all the devices. So you can apply those or even do custom SQL to build metrics that are maybe a bit more complex than the simple ones included there. So to build a chart, it is recommended certainly just to understand a few of those fundamental objects. And certainly as your charts become a bit more complex in what they do, they might allow for additional dimensions or additional metrics and have additional requirements depending on that. So for dimensions, let's go ahead and we'll look at location here. So I'm going to build a dashboard for the inventory of the compute locations. And then on metric, I just want to know, and I have a saved metric. So every data set defaults to having just a count of rows. So Insights Plus will just do that for you out of the box. But maybe I want to do a sum or an average, then you can specify that here, or a custom SQL where I can actually write the SQL for that metric. So in this case, since I am going to look at device, I am going to do a count of that across locations and save that. I could also apply filters. We'll enable cross filtering here. That's going to be important for later. And then I can run that and test my chart. So I can see that there are nearly 40% of our systems with no location, quite a few that we recently have in EC2 and Google and then New Haven, right? So our largest has either no location value set that we need to audit, and a large portion are in the cloud environments. So this is starting to give some of the insight I want. I want to change the visuals a bit. So I can do customize, maybe remove that legend. I have the labels here. So labels are going to exist in various chart types. Maybe instead of just the category name, I want to include the value and percentage. I can go ahead and set that. Also change how that sizes. I like the donut a little bit. We can reduce that outer radius, reduce that inner radius a bit, bring it a bit closer. Now we can look at count by location, right? Give that chart a name, and then I can go ahead and save that. Now I don't have a dashboard yet, so let's say inventory. It's going to be my dashboard name. So I could add this chart to an existing dashboard if there's already one that I'm working on, but we're going to save to new dashboard. Now, I only have one chart. That's not going to make much of a compelling dashboard. So let's go ahead and add a few more here. So I can do a table, and I want to just do a raw table so I can just see the inventory in those. So I'll do my device, save that, then go through, select all of the other values I want. So I want the OS name. Let's get resources here. Is it in service as well? That would be helpful. Our the resources, CPU. What else can I throw in here? Storage. Any other value. Local use space. There we go. Throw that in. And the rack that it's in. Maybe I move that to the top here actually. And then what I can do is order those by rack. So if they are in a rack location, it'll be sorted that way. And see our top level location value. Let's put that in. Throw that up at the top there. So I can always reorder those where I like. Let's go ahead and update chart. So I have the pie chart here. Now I have a table. I can go ahead and also customize this a bit. So I want to include a search box so that I can look through any of those rows. And we have a link directly to the device page based upon that data set. That's where you'll notice some of these DVBs as well as data sets formulate that value into a HTML compliant value. So Insights Plus will automatically make that a URL and display the value. So if you notice anything like that, that's why it exists like that. Usually you'll see an additional column called device name for just the name string instead of the HTML. I could include a filter here if I wanted to, but that would be static within the chart. So if I set location, and I have different operators here, is in New Haven, then this chart is always going to be only New Haven data. It won't be any of the other AWS values or anything like that. So if I wanted to look at a different location or include different data, I'd have to come back and edit this filter. And there's a more dynamic way to do this. In this case, maybe if I wanted a dashboard just for a specific location that might be useful or a specific OS, I could do that. But let's remove that and I'll show a more flexible option as we go ahead. So this I'm happy with. I do want to change this a bit and not replace my pie chart. So let's say location details and save that. And instead of overwrite, we're going to do save as, save. And let's go ahead and just do a quick card for the number of systems here. So big number is just useful for a display of data. So right now it's just doing a count by device. If I run that, we've got 5,180 systems here. And let's manipulate that a bit. So I'd like to do that, but also change that number size a bit. And let's just call this device count. Save that, save as, save. We're going to do one more, and then we'll move into the dashboard. And then we have count. So let's change this a little bit. We want to do use space, sum that. So it's going to look at all the use space across all of our devices. Use space total. So once you have that data set, you can see I can very quickly start to pick my charts, set my dimensions, the filters, all very quickly. So really the fundamentals is making sure you understand that data set, what's included in there. And from having that data readily available, you can very quickly start to build a lot of different visual analytics in a few minutes. So let's save this now. We've got a few elements on our dashboard. Certainly maybe not something that is going to be what we're going to use as an end state. But for the sake of the video, make sure we don't run too long here. We'll keep it pretty simple. So I could keep going and adding more elements to this dashboard. But let's add a few different components to this. So I can add a tab first. So if this dashboard was going to support multiple different similar use cases, and it might make sense to separate maybe on-prem and compute and cloud and virtualization to different tabs, you could do that. So I can add multiple tabs here. I'll just do compute. Now let's Also helpful to include in here are the rows and columns. This is going to help add structure to your dashboard. So now I have an empty row. I can go ahead and even in that row, I can throw a column in here. So if I wanted to have now these counts all in their own row and column, I could do so. Let's make these a little smaller. We don't need so much space for them. Let's add another column here. Now I've got my use space total. And then I could even, if I wanted to, let's actually do another column just for my pie chart. It's going to use a little bit more space in those cards. And then I can also throw in my table here. So I can do a new row that table exists in. That's going to use a bit more of the space. I'm going to want to see more of that detail, and I can extend that out. All right, so I can even add probably additional other components in here to fit in this dashboard. I certainly have a lot of room to start using that. You can add Markdown even to, if you want to add different documentation in the dashboard, that's helpful to do so. So let's save that. I've got all of my components in that view. Additionally, what I can do before I leave off of that, let's say I remove one or I had other charts and other dashboards that I've removed and I wanted to add here, I can remove that and you'll see that this element now becomes available to move. So I can look for existing charts and throw them in here. Now, once a chart is in a dashboard, it can only exist in that dashboard. So you would have to recreate or duplicate that chart so that it can be in another dashboard. So if you're going to use the same chart but in a different dashboard, you just have to make a new one of the same thing, and you can go to a chart, do a save as like I was doing instead of save and overwrite. That would essentially duplicate your chart. Let's go ahead and save that. Now on filtering, so in the case where we wanted to look at a specific location, as I mentioned, it's easier not to modify your data set or set static filters in your charts. You can add filters on your dashboard. So once you've saved it, you can do that here. I'm going to add a divider. This just helps with organizing as you get into larger dashboards. And we'll call this compute. Put this at the top. Then I've got my filter. So I have filter types. So I can do time, numeric, value. In this case, it's going to be just a simple value. This will be location. And the column that I want to filter on, also location. So what I could do now is pre-filter available values. So if I wanted it to only include certain locations, you could do so. In this case, I want users to be able to look at everything, or set a default value. That might be helpful to assume maybe everyone wants to see New Haven and certain other locations, but then allow them to select others. Also can make the chart load less data initially and then allow you to add more where you like. In this case, we just want to look at everything. I don't need to require that filter, but as you can see, there are other values to include here. I can go ahead and save that. What's also important is scoping. So if I have multiple data sets or multiple tabs in a dashboard, this case it's one data set, one tab currently. But if I had cloud and that was a different data set, it's probably best to not apply those filters on those charts. So if for any reason I wanted device count and used count to always show the totals across every location, I can unscope these and those filters won't apply to them. So something to just to keep in mind, you can control the granularity of what is being filtered on here. Let's just add one more filter and we'll include OS. And dynamically search all the filter values. Now this can be helpful if, like OS returns many values, this will search that data set to see what all the potential ones are and make sure you can search and filter for them. So let's go ahead and save that. So now we have all of the options available here. Now that scoping I showed, every filter currently is in scope. If it wasn't, it would show me what filters are out of scope, meaning the charts I'm viewing, those filters aren't applicable to those charts. So Insights Plus will help you show, are you making sure you're trying filters on charts that are eligible for them. So now I can go ahead, click the various locations I want. So if I wanted to just look at AWS, Amazon, or Azure, then apply my filter, it's going to take those results. Then I can, of course, see my data within that. And this allows users to, without making any changes, see the perspectives that they might care about. If I want to go and audit those systems in no location, I can go and review that. And then what's nice with that HTML, I can see the device name as a value in the dashboard and then just click into that. And that's going to bring me right into the device page. So you can really do that with any object that is stored in Device42. Take that HTML and formulate that into a way to allow you to get a click through on that. So let's go ahead, we'll remove this filter again. And what you can see here, so I'm actually have cross filtering on my table. So I selected a row and you'll notice what's happening here on the top. It's saying I'm filtering by my value in that table. So since I selected a row, most tables, it's probably not relevant to have cross filtering. So just be aware of that. When you set cross filtering, it's probably better for things like bar charts or pie charts and not necessarily tables. So I can see that this icon here is emitting a filter. I can clear that. Then I get the data I want as I expect again. So that's probably a change. I want to go back to that table, remove that cross filter. However, I can now, right from this pie chart, since I do have cross filtering on here, instead of using these dynamic filters, I can just select the slice and that will also filter all of my data. And I can see that that pie chart value, if I click on this, that count by location New Haven is filtering my data. So this allows you to very quickly get your data to their perspectives of those slices. So that's a pretty simple dashboard built from bottoms up. You can start to see it, especially with some of the system-defined ones, how you can really make them very verbose and very complex in the type of insight and use cases that they solve for.